We do begin, though, this morning with a deadly new escalation of violence in Ukraine.
Ukraine's military chief says at least 83 Russian missiles were fired at cities across the country overnight, but more than half of those were intercepted by air defenses. Explosions were reported in several cities, including Kyiv, and the center of the capital was targeted for the first time in months, resulting in multiple deaths and injuries, according to officials. The mayor also said critical infrastructure was hit. The latest wave of attacks comes just days after a blast that rocked the bridge between Crimea and Russia, killing 3 people and causing major damage. Russian President Vladimir Putin accused Ukraine of attacking the bridge, calling it an act of terror. Ukrainian officials have not indicated whether their forces were behind the attack. Now, we've got full coverage this morning, starting with NBC News correspondent Cal Perry, who is the very latest on the ground in Kyiv. Cal?
Hey guys, good morning. According to Ukrainian defense officials, at least 83 rockets and/or drones impacting sites across the country. Here in the capital, we heard the explosions at 8:15 in the morning, the distinct sound of explosions in the downtown area. That was one of 3 waves of attacks we saw here in the capital. Right now, at least 8 people confirmed dead, a number of people wounded. You can expect those numbers will rise as rescue officials get to these sites. And as I said, these were attacks across the country. In the far eastern part of the country, in the city of Kyiv, where our team is on the ground, at least 5 separate explosions reported there. In the central city of Rivne, at least 5 are dead, an unknown number of people wounded, again, in a series of explosions. And all the way west, in the city of Lviv, the power is still out after targeting, we understand, power substations there. And again, here in the capital, at least 2 power stations were targeted. There are areas here in the capital that are without power since the first time, really, since April, when this war was underway. Now, the capital right now is quiet. The streets are basically empty. The mayor is urging people to stay inside, to stay under cover, as he says he doesn't know if this wave of attacks is yet finished. Guys?
Cal Perry, thanks for that.
Let's now bring in Z Guyman. She lives in Kyiv and has joined us multiple times since the war in Ukraine started. Z, thank you so much for being here today. It's so great to see that you're safe. And I'm wondering first if you can just tell us what you've been through as this new attack has unfolded. What did you hear? How do you feel right now about your safety?
Yeah. Well, we moved to the corridor around 6 a.m. when the first alarm started. And we fell asleep with the kids because it was still early. So I woke up to the messages in my work chat because some of my colleagues are still in Kyiv. And so the work chat pretty much also, excuse me for the pun, exploded because everybody was asking how everybody was, so that's how I found out. And then I started scrolling the news because we're far away from the center, but we've heard later explosions that were closer to us. So yeah, it's unnerving because you never know when it's going to happen, and because they're not targeting. They've targeted so many civil buildings that you never know whether your building will be next. So yeah, we've talked about the safety measures with the kids, saying that if I say go and run, then you go and run, and the basics like that.
How are they feeling? How are they processing this? What's that conversation like with them?
I think they went into denial, so they've tried to make jokes about it. So in a way, yeah, I think they're okay. Just we'll have to deal with this after the war. Because I think there will be a lot of psychological issues that we'll have to address after all of this is over and after Ukraine has won.
Absolutely. Of course, understandably so, and just heartbreaking to hear. I'm so sorry that you're having to go through that with your children. Could you tell us just what it's been like recently in Kyiv, and if you've grown more hopeful for a resolution, given that it did seem that life at least was somewhat going on as normal, even if it didn't always feel normal. What did that feel like, and now what does this attack do to your resolve? Do you feel any differently?
If anything, the attack made us angrier. So back when the first explosions on February 24th happened, we were all scared and not knowing what to do because it was all new. By now, there was a whole bunch of donations to the military and everything. So if anything, Ukrainians are growing even more hopeful because it feels like the near-death agony for the Russians. And in Kyiv, everything, it doesn't feel like there is a war sometimes. And it's both good and bad because we cannot forget and just go on. But at the same time, it's good that at least in the larger cities, you don't feel it as much, but we still try to work and try to donate as much as possible to the hospitals and working with the displaced people and with everything that this war has brought.
See, Guyman, amazing to hear you even talk about that right there while you're dealing with this with your own family, donating to the hospital. We appreciate you continuing to talk with us about this. We'll continue to check in. We're praying for your family. Thank you. Stay safe.
And let's get reaction from White House correspondent, NBC News, Josh Letterman, who's following the president in Wilmington, Delaware. Josh, is there any word yet from the White House on this new wave of attacks? What's the latest guidance for U.S. embassy personnel in Kyiv?
We haven't heard from the White House yet, Gotti, but just in the last few minutes, we are hearing from U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Bridget Brink, who is writing on Twitter, our U.S. Embassy Kyiv team is safe after another wave of Russian strikes on civilian sites. She says she is grateful to those responding and working to keep us safe. She says the U.S. is heartbroken for those hurt here and across Ukraine. And you referenced that security alert that went out from the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv this morning to American citizens who are in the country, telling them to shelter in place, saying that this wave of attacks from Russia targeting civilian infrastructure poses a direct threat to civilians, telling people to stay in a shelter and then to seek ground transportation out of Ukraine as soon as possible. Now, we should point out the U.S. Embassy has been telling American citizens to get out of Ukraine ever since this war started. So that is not a change necessarily, but certainly heightened concern this morning as we are seeing this first wave of attacks actually hitting Kyiv in many months, Gotti.
And Josh, last week we heard those very unscripted comments from President Biden about the growing risk of a nuclear Armageddon. That was before this latest attack on the Crimea Bridge. With President Putin convening his National Security Council today in response to that, how is the White House viewing the rising threat level?
Yeah, the White House has really spent the last 3 or 4 days trying to play down those comments from President Biden in that fundraiser where he talked about Armageddon, where he said that this is the most concerning situation since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Since then, the White House has really tried to emphasize that this was not something new, that President Biden had not gotten any new intelligence, but simply this was a continuation of the concern that Biden has had all along about the nuclear saber rattling by President Putin. Take a listen to the way the White House National Security spokesman John Kirby put it as he spoke yesterday on ABC. Take a listen.
His comments were not based on new or fresh intelligence or new indications that Mr. Putin has made a decision to use nuclear weapons. And quite frankly, we don't have any indication that he has made that kind of decision, Martha, nor have we seen anything that would give us pause to reconsider our own strategic nuclear posture in our efforts to defend our own national security interests or those of our allies and partners.
Now, that was all before this most recent wave just in the last few hours of attacks on Kyiv and other cities in Ukraine. Certainly, the White House will be watching very closely to see whether this is an escalation by President Putin that could signal that he is inching closer to using something like a nuclear weapon or a weapon of mass destruction. But so far, the White House maintaining they're not seeing any indications that that is actively in the works, Scotty.
Josh Letterman, thanks so much for that.
And now let's get to the latest on the midterm elections. With less than a month to go, many eyes are on Georgia as the race and the drama around it intensifies. Republican heavyweights are throwing their support behind embattled Georgia Senate candidate Herschel Walker. The former pro football star is locked in a tight race with incumbent Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock. Now, Walker's campaign has been rocked by allegations that he paid for an ex-girlfriend to have one abortion and pressured her to get a second one. Now, his support for a total abortion ban is a cornerstone of his campaign. For his part, Walker has denied the accusations, which NBC News has not independently confirmed. But with control of the Senate on the line, Republicans are pulling out all the stops in an all-out campaign push for Walker. For more, we're joined by NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Rafa. She's in Atlanta. Ali, good morning. Thanks for being up early there for us. So first, just tell us the latest. I mean, there's been a lot of back and forth, a lot of accusations, followed by many responses, and now this campaign push from fellow Republicans, support behind him. What's the latest?
Good morning, Savannah. That's right. I really can't stress enough how important this crucial Senate race is in Republicans' fight to win back control of what is now this 50-50 Senate, with, of course, Vice President Kamala Harris having the power of that tie-breaking vote. And now we're seeing Republicans rally around Herschel Walker in light of these allegations. We heard this weekend that NRSC Chairman Rick Scott, who's in charge of electing Senate Republicans, as well as Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton, have committed to coming down here to Georgia to campaign for Walker. In addition to that, we're also hearing that NRSC ad spending dollars that were originally allocated for a New Hampshire Senate race are being directed here to Georgia instead. They're also telling us that the NRSC is staffing up here in Georgia in the weeks up until Election Day. But Savannah, this doesn't seem to be phasing voters here. It seems that voters that I've talked with on the ground here say that they made up their minds a long time ago, both Republicans and Democrats. Take a listen to what one of them told me. What is your reaction to these latest allegations against Herschel Walker?
Unfortunate. Not really sure if it means anything to voters. I feel like in Georgia, a lot of people already have their minds made up of what they're going to do leading up to Election Day. So no matter what they hear, no matter who says what, they're going to vote whichever way they got their mind made up to vote.
And that voter telling me he feels that way because since the beginning of this campaign, since Herschel Walker has become the nominee, there, of course, have been a string of allegations against him. And so that's really what we're hearing from most voters here on the ground in Georgia, who say that all of these controversies are a distraction from issues they want to hear more about, issues they hope are going to be brought up when Herschel Walker and Senator Warnock face off in their first and so far only debate in Savannah on Friday.
Now let's talk about the other side of this. I mean, Republicans who are not supporting him, we haven't heard of all that many, but you did sit down with Georgia's outgoing Republican Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan. What did he tell you?
Yeah, so since the beginning of this race, there has seemed to be this divide among national Republicans who have rushed to Walker's defense, and then these state Republicans who have only grown more frustrated with that support as more allegations continue to surface against Herschel Walker. And I sat down with Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, who notably was more candid with me since he's not running for re-election, and he really told me the source of his frustration. Take a listen.
I think this is part of the Donald Trump hangover. We can never get to this place again as Republicans. This is a horrible place for us to be, not just here in Georgia, but in other parts of the country. This should be a layup for us in the House and the Senate, and we should be tracking in 2024 to be able to step up to the plate and put a president forward, a nominated Republican. But yet we continue to have to deal with Donald Trump.
His comments really setting the stage for who we should and could expect to see come down here and support Herschel Walker in these next few critical weeks before the midterm. Savannah.
Ali Rafa, great interview. Thanks so much.
And turning now to the latest developments on the investigation into the attack on the Capitol. The House January 6 committee has announced that its next public hearing will be held this Thursday at 1 p.m. Chairman Benny Thompson also said all 9 lawmakers who are on the panel will have a chance to speak on Thursday, which is different from hearings over the summer. NBC News reporter Julie Turskin joins us now with more. Julie, good morning. If you could walk us through all the new developments here and the information that the committee has received since that last public hearing and what kind of impact that could have. What could we hear on Thursday?
Yeah, after the committee held 8 blockbuster hearings between the months of June and July, they were busy spending the next 2 months in between those hearings and the one we expect coming up on Thursday, conducting numerous interviews behind closed doors of high-profile cabinet officials, including Mike Pompeo and Elaine Chao, and also with Ginny Thomas, the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, in a closed-door interview just 2 weeks ago. But perhaps the biggest piece of this puzzle and the biggest piece of information the committee was able to receive that could be crucial to this upcoming hearing are the thousands of pages of documents that the Secret Service handed over to the committee. Listen to what Zoe Lofgren had to say yesterday about this.
This is really much worse than I expected when we started this. We all knew that the president had summoned the mob and whipped them up and sent them off to the Capitol. But some of the other things we've discovered are really worse than I imagined.
So Committee Zoe Lofgren, of course, previewing the hearing this week on MSNBC yesterday, saying those Secret Service documents potentially could prove more to those crucial hours on January 5th and 6th, especially after Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony, in which she detailed just how privy to information the Secret Service was.
And Julie, has there been any indication that this might be the last public hearing from the committee? And should the public expect any kind of official report to be released before the midterm elections?
Yeah, our sources are telling us this upcoming hearing could be the last one before the midterms and could be the final one, period. And we knew committee members have said in the past that they expect this hearing to be potentially the last one in which they present new evidence, new factual evidence. They could hold a hearing later on just to unveil the report that they've been working on and writing. And we could expect some sort of interim report ahead of the midterm elections. But as for a final one, that will likely have to wait until after the midterms. Committee members saying that's when their lease on life ends, of course, at the end of this year, because the committee has only been authorized to be formed during this Congress. And with control of the House not certain for the next Congress, that remains to be seen. The committee knows they just have a few more weeks left to get this report done and also to decide on any criminal referrals. Committee member Adam Schiff telling reporters previously that that will be a unanimous decision and one they have not made yet, including whether to criminally refer to the Department of Justice, former President Trump.
Julie Sirkin, thanks so much. And jury selection is set to begin today in Los Angeles in a new sexual assault trial of former Hollywood movie producer Harvey Weinstein. He is facing 11 charges of sexual assault brought on by 5 women.
Yeah, those charges include rape and sexual battery, and he faces up to life in prison if found guilty. Weinstein has pleaded not guilty. Now, as you probably remember, Weinstein's already serving time in prison following his 2020 conviction in New York for rape and criminal sexual assault. Weinstein is now appealing that decision. And now this all comes exactly 5 years after the New Yorker released its bombshell report accusing Weinstein of sexual abuse, sparking the Me Too movement. NBC News legal analyst Danny Ceballos joins us here on set for more. Danny, always great to have you with us. Thanks for being here. So, if somebody's like, oh, is this deja vu? Or if you haven't been following super closely and you're thinking, wasn't he convicted? Yes, but that was different charges in a different state. Walk us through this one, what this means, what prosecution's up against, and how jury selection will be.
Different victims, same challenges for the prosecution because they have elected to bring charges that relate as far back, I believe, as 2004, with other charges in between dating to 2009, 2010. Anytime you're prosecuting a case where the allegations date back that far, the prosecution is going to run into challenges in meeting its burden of proof. But those same challenges are also the defense's, because the defense has to figure out what, where, and how they were doing something 10 years or more ago. So a big challenge here, and another challenge for the prosecution, and I've seen prosecutions get in trouble for this. They are bringing in what's called prior bad acts. Evidence not testified to by the accusers themselves, but by other people that will essentially show that, hey, this Weinstein guy, he was doing this to other people. The challenge there is that this kind of evidence is strictly limited in court. And we've already seen in the Bill Cosby case, for example, and even in Weinstein's New York case, this kind of evidence, if convicted, gets heavily challenged on appeal and leaves the prosecution ripe and open to an overturning of the conviction.
Going before jury selection, I mean, has the judge made any type of ruling on what type of prior bad acts the jury will be able to hear?
Yeah, the prosecution's bringing in that evidence. And in fact, here's the way it works. The rule is you can't bring in other evidence to show that generally somebody was a bad person because they did other prior bad acts. There's an exception to that rule. If you're not bringing it in to show, Judge, we're not using it to show that he's a bad person. We're using it to show that, this is his motive, or that this is his modus operandi. This is how he always does it. Maybe he gives them a Benadryl in the Cosby case. In this case, maybe he puts them in their limo, drives them to a hotel. That's the reason for this evidence. Now, is it mincing words? Well, some appeals courts think it is, and it really is very fact-specific. So proceed with caution, prosecution. Use prior bad acts evidence at your own risk.
Let's not talk about that appeal in New York I mentioned. So that's something he was convicted of. He's now appealing it. Can that impact this trial at all? What does that mean? Because that was in New York. This one's in Los Angeles. Is there any impact on each other? Because I know people are worried about it. I actually just interviewed one of the first Harvey Weinstein accusers who kind of kicked off this Me Too movement. And that's what she said. Yeah, we're worried about it. I mean, there was that conviction. Now we're starting this new trial. How are they related?
The impact is largely symbolic in that if his conviction is overturned, then the L.A. trial is the only opportunity to hold Harvey Weinstein accountable. And the other distinction is really just procedural. It'd be more about, hey, what jurisdiction gets to hold him in terms of where he serves his sentence? But because the facts and the incidents are so different, they are largely not going to spill over into each other in terms of the evidence presented. But of course, you have to seat a jury that, even if they're aware of Weinstein's conviction, will not be biased against him in that trial. That is no small task.
Absolutely not.
Danny Swallows, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks, Danny. Always great to have you here. Now, Tropical Storm Julia made landfall in the southern Caribbean, bringing torrential rainfall to parts of Central America this weekend.
Meteorologist Michelle Grossman joins us now with the latest. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning to you both. And we're going to see Julia dissipating as we go throughout the day to a remnant low, but still going to bring a lot of rain to spots in Central America. I believe we have some video of some cleanup being done as a result of Julia as it made landfall. We're looking at very large waves, and that's going to be the thing as we go throughout the day. This is in Nicaragua, El Salvador being impacted today. Lots of rainfall. We're looking at the potential for some flash flooding, some mudslides, trees down, power lines down. And again, that will be the theme as we go throughout this Monday. The good news is it is weakening, but still has a punch as we're going to see lots of rain being dropped. Julia dissipating as we go throughout today. Here's that rainfall amount. We're looking anywhere from 1, 2, 3, even up to 5 or 6 inches of rain. That's going to bring the risk for mudslides and also flash flooding. Where you see those darker colors, the yellows, the reds, the oranges, that's where we're looking at the potential for the heaviest rain. Now, we're also looking at a chilly morning for many. You need the jackets, you need the sweaters in portions of New England, also the mid-Atlantic. We're looking at the Appalachians, really chilly this morning, too. Temperatures in the 30s and 40s. 10 million under a frost advisory, so you need to cover those sensitive plants. Otherwise, we're going to be warm in the Intermountain West, the Northwest, the Northern and Central Plains. Temperatures so above normal. 95 degrees today in Redding, California. That's 13 degrees above normal for this time of year. 80 in Wichita, 80 also in Omaha. And this heat is going to slide to the east as we head towards tomorrow, so the Midwest, excuse me. Also, portions of the Great Lakes will be warm tomorrow. Temperatures in the mid-70s in Detroit. Also in Annapolis, we're looking at 10 degrees above normal in Detroit. And then the mid-Atlantic to the northeast, you're going to be warm on Wednesday. Temperatures into the 70s, the upper 60s in New York City. But back to that October chill by Friday, 64 on Friday, 64 also in D.C. Only in the 50s in Cleveland by Friday. Watching the threat for flooding in portions of New Mexico, also western Texas. We have showers and storms. We've seen it all weekend long, and we're going to see that once again today, just rounds of showers and storms, bringing the threat for flooding into this evening. Back to you guys.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.